We're going to sew this cloth pad that's from one of my designs on Spoonflower. My shop's Katie Crafty Mom. This print is a fat quarter, and I printed it off on the petal cotton fabric. So the first step is we're going to cut out each of the pad shapes. There are 4 different pad prints on this design. 2 of them are this smaller size, which would be considered like a regular size, and the other 2, the cat ones, are larger and they're a little bit different shape. So the finished sizes, I'm measuring this after they're already sewn up. The regular size, the one I'm cutting out currently, ends up being a little over 9 inches long. Not quite 9.5. I would say it's close to a 9-inch size pad. And then the larger one, the 2 that have the cat, that look like a cat, they are, let's see, just under 10 inches. So they're more closer to 9, and they're over 9.5 inches, not quite 10. This piece that I'm cutting out right now is the template for cutting your absorbent layer that's going to go in the middle. It's going to be sandwiched inside the top layer, which is the design, and the back layer, which is going to be, I recommend using pull fabric as a back layer. It's kind of got a plastic coating, and that just prevents leaks. That is what I like to use. It's PUL. It can be used for cloth pads and diapers. I think people use it for other things as well. So now I'm just cutting out all of the rest of the designs that are on this fat quarter, just to have them all prepped and ready. So when I sit down and sew, I can kind of assembly line and do them all at the same time. Makes the work go a little faster. So that the inner layer, we could talk about that a little bit, the different fabrics you could use. There's so many different things you can use for an inner layer of fabric. There is a great product called Zorb, Z-O-R-B, and it's very absorbent. It's kind of like batting, but it can be all compressed together. There's different kinds of Zorb you can get. The one that I'm showing in this video is layered up, so it kind of has little, it looks more like a pad to me that you would buy in the store, but it's very thick. So you do not want to make a whole pad out of it because it is multiple layers of that. So you would just want to make the small inside oval like I'm cutting with it if you got this particular one. And I can link all of the different products that I use in the description below. There's lots of different kinds of Zorb you can get, like I said. And if you don't want to invest in this product yet, a old bath towel, or there's lots of products you can reuse. Old t-shirts. If you're going to use old t-shirts, just know that your absorbency is probably not going to be a lot. Now, if you combine that with a towel or something like that, then your absorbency is going to get better. Now we're going to go ahead and sew the inner absorbent layer. And I want to make sure that I get it in the center. Honestly, depending on where you want the most absorbent part in your pad, it doesn't have to be towards the very center of your pad. If you feel like you want your the top of it to be more absorbent, just don't put it right in the seam line. So I'm trying to get it completely in the center of my pad. So I'm going to show you the trick for how to center it. So I'm folding this piece in half, and then I'm going to fold it over. Since it's so thick, this zorb, I'm just going to fold it in half this way, and then to find the center, I'm going to fold it again, and I'm going to use my pin and kind of stick it into where that center is. And then I'm going to find the center of my cloth pad. And I'm not ironing it, I'm just kind of using my hands to finger press down to where I have the center. So then I'm just going to line up my sewing pin right into the cross point. And then I'm going to kind of eyeball, make sure that it's centered, and I'm going to go ahead and pin it. And I'm going to sew a very narrow seam all around the outside of this oval. Keep in mind that whatever thread you're using in your bobbin, it's going to show up on the front side of that fabric. So if you want to have, for instance, this pad is like pink and purples, like if you wanted to put a lavender thread in your bobbin so that it wouldn't show very much on the outside of your pad. I am using white so you can see a little better, and honestly, I keep white in my sewing machine pretty much 24/7. I buy a big spool of white thread, and that keeps me from having to change out my thread often. But if you like your thread to coordinate, you're going to want to make sure your bobbin thread has matching thread on it. So for this step, I'm sewing pretty close to the edge of the absorbent layer. You just want to make sure that you catch every bit of that layer so that it doesn't go anywhere. You want it to stay where it's at. When I'm sewing pads, a tip is you have to have patience and you have to go slow, especially when you're first learning. Just even if you sometimes if you have to hand crank a few stitches around the corners or around those bends, take those really slow, and then you can get them perfect. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. But this is not the first pad that I have ever sewn. So do not think that I was able to get this close to the side with ease on my first one, because that didn't happen. You're seeing years of sewing these, and I'm not showing you my first one that I've ever made. So please don't compare yourself thinking that you can't do this. It's just going to take some practice. If it doesn't look just like this one, just keep practicing. It will get better. And I'm not saying that this is perfect either. So I didn't pull my threads through. If you really want to make them look really nice, you can let those threads stay long, thread them through a needle, and pull them through the back of the fabric, and then you won't have any of that on the outside of your pad. You won't have any of the ends of the thread showing. So if you don't like that look, I'm not a super picky sewer when it comes to that, but that's definitely a nice look. You can make it look a lot nicer if you pull them to the back, kind of like you would with if you're a quilter and you do quilting, you pull those threads to the back. So now I'm just going to continue putting the linings in the rest of these pads, folding them in half to get the centers, and just show you how I'm doing it if you want to follow along. On these ones that are longer, if you prefer having that centerpiece, that inner layer further to the bottom or further to the top, feel free to, it doesn't have to be in the center if that's not how you want to make yours. Feel free to put that wherever you want. It's just basically a guide to where you can put it. I feel like I kind of centered it and then put it right between the cat's eyes so that my line, when I'm sewing it, would go right over the little nose portion. So almost kind of look more like they have a little spot on their nose. And I could have switched out my thread there to orange and it would have looked nice. I didn't kind of realize that until I got to the next one. And then so I'm showing you right now that I'm switching out my thread. I'm going to use gray thread so that when I go back and sew this gray cat, it's going to have gray top stitching on it. So that's what I'm doing right now is I'm winding a bobbin with gray thread on it and switching that out. I just find it, if I have to stop and wind a bobbin and change my thread, sometimes I lose interest in what I'm doing. So sometimes I will just use white thread because then I don't lose my momentum of making something. When I only have a few little bits of time here and there to get my projects done, I don't know if you're like me, if you work full time and you do your hobbies on your off time, you may not have tons of time. You have kids, you're busy. I don't know your life situation. You might have plenty of time and you could make everything look perfect. But that just explains why I do things the way I do. I try to get everything perfect, but it's not. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm self-taught, so I have literally been sewing since I could use a sewing machine, but I haven't really taken a lot of classes. I have just done things and learned the hard way how to make things, and I will sew something and it won't look very good, and then I'll learn that next time I'll do it differently and it will look better. So that's kind of a little backstory on kind of what I do. Okay, so now that we have all those sewn, we're going to talk about backings. These are some of the pull fabrics that I have, and I'm going to kind of talk about each one briefly as I show them to you. There's different thicknesses. This one's very, feels very rubbery and slick. This one's thinner. I've bought all of these online, and I can link to the place that I bought them. This is fleece. So this is a fleece that has a pull backing on it. So you can kind of see it's got that shiny layer. This is a white pull fabric that I bought at Joann's. And it's kind of got a jersey feel on the outside and then that slicky on the inside. This is a thinner pole fabric that I bought online. I just love the pattern. And this one right here is a jersey fabric on the outside, the purple, and it's got the pole fabric on underneath. It's a very nice fabric. I'll link it too. We're going to use it on the back of this pink pad that I'm making today. It really coordinates well with, if you want to get some pole, you may consider, if you don't want to make huge investments. This is stuff that I have collected over several years, and I've just kind of purchased fabrics that will kind of coordinate with some of the different fabrics I like to use. When it comes to sewing the backings, the pole fabric onto it, I do not like to cut it out. I like to lay it on top and then cut it out after I've sewn it. I don't like to pin it. Now, if you want to pin it, you can. There's contradicting things. Some people say don't pin through that pole fabric because then you're basically popping the balloon because it can puncture it. Some people say it doesn't matter. I honestly don't know because I don't use pins. So I couldn't tell you, I couldn't compare the two because I don't ever pin mine. If you really wanted to secure it, you could pin along the edges where you're going to be sewing anyway. But for this video, I'm not showing any pinning because I'm going to go very slow and I'm going to hold it together. But this is where I'm talking about how you have to be patient and go slow. You really don't want to have to pick this fabric or pick these stitches out. So you want to try not to go off. So that's why it's important to go slow through this step. And take your time. I stop and I lift my presser foot and I turn. As long as you make sure your needle is down, that way your fabric doesn't move. If you put your needle down, lift your presser foot, and then turn your fabric just a little bit, that just kind of helps keep everything moving nicely. I don't know if that makes sense. Sometimes I try to explain things, and in my head, it makes total sense, but then I go back and listen to myself talk, and I'm like, what am I trying to say? So I am so sorry if I am confusing you guys. My brain works in weird ways sometimes, and I don't know why. So I'm just, if you're a visual learner, then you can just follow along by watching me. If you like to hear the commentary, then I can keep talking, or you can also mute me if I'm driving you crazy. But anyway, that's another example of me putting my needle down, lifting my presser foot, and moving the fabric. Now the back of that pole fabric is going to be slick. So that's why I like not cutting it out, because then I have a little bit of wiggle room. But you want to make sure that your pad is nice and flat, like the fabric is nice and flat together. The right sides of the fabric, it's nice and flat. You don't want it to have any bubbles in it, because then it's going to really mess it up later when you go to top stitch the whole thing. It won't lay right. We are leaving a section open for turning, and I have found the best place to do that is not on this pad. It's not on the very end. It's kind of on the side underneath the wing. You want to make sure you turn the wing and go a couple stitches past it, but then right there on that very edge is the best place. And then when I go to cut my fabric out after it's all sewn, I like to leave a little more fabric right there where you leave it open for turning, just in case you need it when you go back and top stitch the whole thing together. When we're sewing up the other design pads that have the cat body, the opening at the bottom of the cat is the best place for turning. And I've kind of designed that so that you just leave that bottom portion open, and that's the easy way to turn it right side out. So it's just showing me trimming the fabric. And you want to make sure, a big thing is you want to make sure to clip those spots between the wings, those corners. Not corners, but I'm trying to think of the word. You'll want to clip them so that they'll turn well. It's what I'm doing right here. Clipping, I always called it clipping the corners. So maybe that is what it's called. If not, you can put it in the comments below and let me know what I'm trying to think of. You just want to make sure you clip those. That way when you go to turn it right side out, they'll turn out correctly. Because otherwise it will look like the fabric is pulling. And it won't lay nice when you turn it right side out. So I'm clipping the seam just a bit, like didn't quite leave enough space. So I'm going back and opening that turning hole a little bit so that I have a little more room. And so I'm basically going to try to get the inner layer out first. So I'm folding that inner layer kind of in half and kind of using that to help me turn. I don't know if you can understand what I'm doing by watching when I'm turning it right side out. That kind of makes it easier to turn this one because that inner layer is so thick. If you want some more absorbency than just that one small oval in the middle, you can add another layer of fabric. And this is where that t-shirt fabric comes in handy if you use it on top of, as a sandwich layer on top of the pole, in between the pole and your pad piece. And then that's just one more layer of absorbency you can have inside your pad. If you put too many layers, then it makes it too thick. But sometimes like a cotton t-shirt, you could probably add if it's really thin, you could add a couple layers of that. A tea towel, if you have an old tea towel, you could use a couple layers of that. Another great thing would be to use a layer of flannel. Flannel is a great one to use. If you have an old kid's blanket or flannel from Joann's or any of your local fabric stores that sell that. Sometimes I like to reduce, reuse, recycle. So I like to use stuff that I have that are just going to go to waste anyways. So I kind of have a bin of scrap fabrics to make use of, and that's where it's really handy. You can use them in these situations. You just want to keep in mind whatever you're using, you want it to be clean, not something that's been like work wear, like men's old workwear that's been out in gasoline, you know what I mean? just be aware of where it's been because where you're going to put it, that's all I'm going to say on that topic. Okay, so now we're going to top stitch around the whole thing. And this, I'm going to use a pretty small seam. I'm going to try to get as close to the edge to top stitch that down as possible. And I'm going over the opening first. That way it's just make sure to close that opening up, because that's what I just worked on, and I don't want it to come out. And you could use clips and clip it closed, but I'm just going to start here in my top stitching and stitch as close to the edge again as possible. And we're going to top stitch around the whole thing, and this just gives the pad a nice finished look. You're almost there. You're almost done. So we could talk a little bit about care while I'm stitching this, and I can kind of tell you how I take care of my pads. So before, like after I make them, they'll go through a wash cycle before they get used. It's a good idea to go ahead and let them soak. So my normal wash cycle for mine is every couple of days after they're used. I keep them in a wet bag, which I make out of the pole fabric. And then every couple of days I will soak them. Generally I'll soak them overnight, just because they need like a good 3 hours, maybe 4 hours to soak. It's basically like a pre-wash. And then I rinse them and then I wash them, and they come out very clean. And that's how I wash them every time I use them. And usually I only have to do like 2 loads a month. And I throw them in with our towels. So when I wash our towels, I just kind of like make sure there's a load of towels, and then I wash them with those. And I do put mine in the dryer. I wash them through a normal wash, a towel wash, and then I put them in the dryer. The only thing about putting them in the dryer is because they're small. On occasion, I have had mine get stuck in the dryer turner, and then that can kind of mess them up. So you can hang them to dry. You can clip them to each other and make a big long chain and hang them to dry in your shower. I kind of would rather put them in my dryer and just risk them. I've only had them get stuck a couple times in the dryer turner. But that's really disheartening to have your favorite pad get stuck in there. So I don't know if I'll start air drying them or not. But just an FYI, if your dryer likes to eat socks, you probably don't want to put these. You probably don't want to put these in your dryer. You may just want to air dry them. And anytime you're going to put them in the dryer, that's also going to make their lifespan a little shorter anyway, because that's what they say anyway. But I always machine wash them. I just do the pre-soak for a couple hours. I usually let them soak overnight just because that's easier. I can basically put them in a bin full of water, and I use an Oxy clean soap, which I can link that in the box below as well, the soap that I like to use. And now it's all done except for the snaps. So I like to use plastic snaps, and they're going to be the ones they use for cloth diapering, or you can use these plastic snaps for a lot of different things, but they are great for this. If you do not, again, this is an investment that I have worked up over time collecting the different things that I use. This is not something I had the first time I made a cloth pad. I did try Velcro, but I wouldn't recommend starting with Velcro because then Velcro sticks to everything. Now, if you haven't ever tried cloth pads and you just want to try it out, go ahead and make a few with Velcro because it's cheap and you're not investing in a lot of product. But just know that that Velcro is probably going to drive you crazy after a while because it'll stick to because Velcro sticks to things. So I did have to invest in this snap tool. Or you can buy snaps that you sew on. I think almost any craft store is going to have snaps like that. The metal snaps they're called like sew-in snaps. But these ones I'm using are the plastic ones. So I'm folding into half to try to find the good center spot. But my fabric, you can kind of see it still has the center fold line that I originally put on it. So we're going to use that to center our snap on. So I used the tool that came with my snap kit. It's like an awl, AWL. And to poke the hole because you kind of need it to poke a hole through that pole fabric. So now I'm going to layer up. So when you do the snaps, you want to make sure for the backing ones you have the two different shapes. So we're going to layer on the bottom of this tool. It has a spot. That black thing is the spot. This is kind of fiddly to do with my gloves on. Oh, I should explain why I'm wearing these gloves too. But let's talk about this first. So there's like a little groove for that snap to fit right in, that snap head to fit right in. And then you put your fabric in there, and then you put the snap topper. And what this tool does is it pushes the center of the snap head down and smashes it so that it holds both of those pieces together. So you want to make sure that center part of your snap is pushed all the way down, or it could keep your snap from snapping well together to the other part. So sometimes if it feels like that center part of the snap isn't all the way down, I will go back and press it again. So I'm using my awl again to poke a hole through the pole so that it'll be a little easier to put my snap in. Now I'm going to show you what not to do. So do you see that I put the snap on the wrong direction? It's like, give it a minute. I'll flip it around and show you. So you can see when it's folded that both of the top snaps are facing out. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure they're opposites. That will help it to snap around. So before you put the second snap on, because they're very hard to get off, not impossible, I have done it, but you want to make sure before you completely snap it down in place, you know it's in the right spot. Don't make that mistake. I've made it. And when you're trying to get those snaps off, you can cut your fabric and then ruin all the hard work you've just done. So real quick, I'm going to tell you the trick of why I'm wearing these gloves, which I should have told you at the very beginning. These are quilting gloves. They have little grippies on the undersides. and they are so helpful when you are working with these small pads. It just helps you keep a hold of it really well so that you can make those small seams and you have more control over the fabric. So it's also something you could look into investing in, because I do think they do make a difference when it comes to sewing these things so that it's easier for you to have control over sewing it, because you can hold on to that fabric a little better. So this is another spot where I'm showing that center part of the snap doesn't seem like it's down far enough because my snap isn't closing very well. So I'm just putting it back in the tool, and I'm going to squeeze it one more time and make sure that center part gets pushed down a little further. And that will help my snap stay together really well. And there you can see my snap is holding, and your cloth pad's all done. Ta-da! And now you can use it month after month after month and not have to purchase any more products that go into the landfill. All you have to do is throw it in a load with your towels and wash. All the stuff I've talked about will be linked down in the description below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.